The first thing I remember is the sound of my son's voicemail playing in an empty church parking lot. "Hey, Mom. I'm so sorry I can't make it. I got tied up. I'll call you later." That was it. No explanation. No real apology. Just my only son telling me he would miss the most important day of my life. I stood there in my best navy dress, holding a bouquet of white lilies that were starting to wilt in the heat, staring at my phone as if it might change its mind and ring again with a better answer. It was the morning of my retirement ceremony, the day my hospital was honoring me after 38 years as a nurse. And my son, the man I had raised alone after my husband walked out, had chosen not to come. But what hurt even more was that I was not alone in that parking lot. A young man I barely knew was standing beside my car, holding his own jacket over my shoulders, because my hands had started shaking so badly I could barely keep my purse from slipping to the ground. "Mrs. Walker," he said gently, "you don't have to do this alone." I looked at him through the blur in my eyes. His name was Eli Carter, 27, maybe 28. Tall, dark hair, rolled up sleeves, the kind of face that looked serious until he smiled. And when he did, it felt like the entire world had softened a little. He was my late husband's mechanic's son, technically, or maybe my old neighbor's nephew. The family connection was complicated and half forgotten, which is why I barely knew him at all. He had started helping me with simple things after my knee surgery months earlier. Fixing a leaking sink, picking up prescriptions, driving me to appointments when my son said he was too busy. I had always told myself it was temporary kindness, the kind people gave when they felt sorry for an older woman with no husband and a son who kept forgetting to call. I had no idea then that this stranger would become the one person who stood next to me when my own blood turned his back on me. And I had no idea that by the end of that day, the truth behind my son's absence would tear my family apart. The retirement banquet was supposed to be simple. A little speech, a framed plaque, a few photos, some cake. My coworkers had planned it for weeks. They had asked me to bring my family, and I had done what mothers do, the thing we do even when our hearts are tired. I believed my son would show up. My son, Daniel, was 34 and had spent the last 6 years drifting through life like he was waiting for something better to begin. He had a degree he barely used, opinions he never backed up, and a habit of making every conversation about his own stress. He was kind enough when he wanted something, charming when he needed to be. But lately, there had been a coldness in him I could never explain. Every time I asked him how he was doing, he answered like I had interrupted an important meeting. He had promised he would be there. The night before, I had called him twice. "Mom, I said I'd come." He had sighed the second time, like I was being difficult. "I know," I told him. "I just wanted to be sure. It means a lot to me." "It's a retirement thing, not a wedding," he said, and I laughed weakly, trying not to hear the edge in his voice. "It still matters to me." "I'll be there," he said. Relax. Relax. That one word still stings when I think about it. When I walked into the banquet hall alone, there were balloons, a long table of food, and a screen showing photos of my years at the hospital. My coworkers clapped when they saw me. Some of them hugged me. My manager, Linda, took my hand and said, "We were wondering if your son was running late." I smiled because there was nothing else to do. "He'll be here," I lied. But an hour passed, then another. I checked my phone so many times I felt ashamed. No call, no text. Just a calendar reminder, glowing like an insult. That was when Linda gently touched my arm and said, "Helen, there's someone outside looking for you." I walked into the hallway and found Eli standing there with my jacket folded over one arm. He looked awkward, almost uncomfortable, like he was not used to walking into elegant places and being noticed. "I didn't want to interrupt," he said, "but I thought maybe you'd want to know your car is making that weird sound again." It was such a normal thing to say that I nearly laughed. And then, to my horror, I started crying right there in the hallway. He looked completely panicked for half a second. "Oh no," he muttered. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean I just thought." "It's not the car," I whispered. He stood there silently while I pulled myself together enough to tell him my son had not come. He didn't ask why. He didn't say the usual things people say when they do not know what to do with an older woman's sadness. He simply said, "Do you want me to stay?" I almost told him no. Pride was still alive in me that day, even if it was limping. But then I thought about the empty chair the hospital had saved for my son. The folded program with his name written beside mine in the section marked Family Guests. I thought about the way I had been smiling all morning as if my heart was not breaking. So I nodded. Eli stayed. He sat through my speech. He clapped louder than anyone when my plaque was handed to me. And when I looked out over the room and saw that empty seat, he was the only one who did not look away from my face. It sounds small now, but on that day, it mattered more than I can explain. After the ceremony, I found the voicemail. Not from Daniel. From the hospital social worker asking me to call her back when I had a moment because a file I had once signed years ago had resurfaced during an old estate review. I stared at the message without understanding it. Estate review. That phrase alone should have made me suspicious, but I was too hurt to think clearly. All I could think about was my son. I drove home with Eli behind me in his old blue truck because he insisted on making sure I got there safely. I remember turning into the driveway and seeing Daniel's car already parked there. For one brief second, relief rushed through me. Maybe he had come after all. Maybe the voicemail meant nothing. Maybe he was inside waiting with flowers, embarrassed he had been late. Then I opened the front door and saw him standing in my kitchen with his wife, Miranda, and a man in a pressed gray suit I did not know. And the first thing Daniel said to me was, "We need to talk about the house." I still remember the way time slowed. The flowers in my hands trembled. Eli came in behind me and paused when he saw the three of them. Daniel's face tightened with annoyance, not guilt, as if I had interrupted him in the middle of something tedious. "Not now," I said, because I was still trying to find the version of reality where my son had come home to celebrate me. But Daniel ignored me. "The house is too much for you now," he said. "You can't keep maintaining it. Miranda and I have been talking, and we found a buyer." I stared at him. "A buyer?" He nodded toward the man in the suit. "This is Mr. Ellis. He's handling the paperwork." "What paperwork?" I asked. Miranda, who always wore her smile like lipstick on a knife, stepped forward and said, "We thought this would be easier in person. The market is good right now. You've lived here long enough. It's time to downsize." "I am not selling my house," I said slowly. Daniel sighed like he was speaking to a child. "Mom, please don't do this in front of people." "People?" I repeated. "You're in my house with a stranger trying to sell it without even asking me?" "That's not fair," he said. "We're trying to help." I looked at the suit-clad man. "Get out." He blinked, glanced at Daniel, and put his folder under his arm. "Maybe I should give you all a minute." "Actually," Miranda said, "that might be best." No one asked me whether I wanted a minute. No one asked why my retirement ceremony had been abandoned. No one even noticed the plaque still in my bag. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat like he owned the place. "Mom, this is getting harder than it needs to be," he said. "The house is in your name, yes, but that doesn't mean you know what's best anymore. You're tired. You're still grieving, Dad. You forget things." I went cold. He had never spoken to me like that before. Not directly. Not with witnesses. Not with that calm, rehearsed cruelty that meant he had already decided I was an obstacle. "I do not forget things," I said. Miranda crossed her arms. "Then remember you said you wanted Daniel to have security. This is security." Then it hit me. Not the whole truth, but enough of it to make my stomach sink. This was not about my house. It was about something else. Because the man in the suit had mentioned paperwork. The social worker had mentioned an estate review. And suddenly I remembered an old envelope my husband had insisted I keep in the cedar box in my closet. I had not opened it in years. My husband, Robert, had died 7 years earlier from a sudden heart attack that shattered what was left of our family. He had told me before he died that everything important was in order. I had trusted him. Too much, maybe. I told Daniel to leave. He laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "You can't just throw me out of my own future. My house is not your future." "Then what is it?" he snapped. "Yours? You want to live here forever playing martyr? That's what this is really about, isn't it?" I wanted to scream. Instead I said, "You missed my retirement ceremony. The room went silent. Miranda frowned. Daniel barely blinked. "That's what this is about?" he said. "Mom, I had something come up. Something more important than me. It wasn't the right time." "For what?" "For your mother to stop working after nearly 4 decades. For me to be honored. For you to sit in one chair for 1 hour." He stood up so suddenly the chair scraped the floor. "You always do this," he said. "You make everything emotional so nobody can have a conversation." Eli, who had been standing quietly near the doorway, said, "Maybe the conversation should start with why you're trying to sell your mother's house." Daniel turned to him with a look of open disgust. "And who were you supposed to be?" "Someone who showed up," Eli said evenly. Miranda gave a small, sharp laugh. "Oh, this is rich." Daniel looked from me to Eli and back again, his jaw hardening. "You've been filling her head with ideas?" My temper rose so fast it frightened me. "Do not speak to him that way," he shrugged. "Mom, he's a nobody. Let's not pretend otherwise." The insult hung in the air. A nobody. That night, for the first time in my life, I saw my son clearly. Not as the child who once held my hand after a fever. Not as the boy who ran out into the rain to buy me carnations from a gas station on Mother's Day when he was 11, but as a grown man who thought love was something he could demand and inherit without ever giving it back. I asked everyone to leave. Daniel said, "You'll regret this." Miranda said, "Think carefully. Not all opportunities stay open." The suit man handed me his card like I might call him later. Then they were gone. Only Eli stayed. He did not speak right away. He simply waited until I sat down at the kitchen table and covered my face with both hands. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Not your fault." "No," he said, "but I think I know why they came." I looked up at him. He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded envelope. "This was left for you a few days ago," he said. "My aunt gave it to me and told me to bring it only if things got bad." I stared at the envelope. It had my name on it in my husband's handwriting. My fingers shook so badly I nearly dropped it. Inside was a letter dated 3 days before Robert died. "Helen, if anything ever happens to me, do not let Daniel rush you into signing anything. Check every document. And if he brings up the house, ask him about the safe deposit box at First Valley Bank. He already knows about it. You may not like what's inside, but you deserve the truth." I read it 3 times. Then I looked at Eli. "How did you get this?" He lowered his eyes. "My aunt worked at the bank for years. She recognized Robert's name when she saw some papers being passed around a while back. She thought maybe you should have this before somebody tried to move too fast." "Somebody?" He nodded toward the dark window, as though the answer was somewhere out there waiting. That was when the second shock came. A week earlier, Daniel had asked me to sign a power of attorney form because he said it would make things easier if I ever needed help with bills. I had refused at first. Then Miranda had called me sweet and patient and said, "You know Daniel only wants to protect you." I hadn't signed it. Not then. But later, after a dizzy spell in the grocery store, Daniel had shown up with flowers and soup and guilt so heavy it felt like a blanket. He had said the form was just in case I got sick. He had said all the right things. And I had signed a temporary version without fully reading it because I trusted him. I sank back in my chair. "What did I do?" I whispered. Eli pulled out a chair beside me. "You didn't do anything wrong. You were trying to trust your son." That should have made me cry harder. But instead I went very still, because I knew my son well enough to recognize the shape of his lies. The next morning, I went to the bank with Eli. The safe deposit box held a second will, one Robert had made after Daniel married Miranda, along with property documents, bank statements, and a note written in my husband's careful, slanted hand. "If Daniel tries to push you out, it is because he thinks there is more money than there is. There isn't. What there is protection. The lake house belongs to you outright. The investment account is in your name only. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise." I stared at the papers in disbelief. Lake House. I had almost forgotten about that place. A small house by Cedar Lake that Robert and I had bought decades ago before life got expensive and messy. We had renovated it one summer with our own hands. Daniel had spent a few childhood vacations there, then later acted as if it was some forgotten scrap of old family history. but the deed was mine alone. My name, my account, my choice. The reason Daniel wanted the house all of a sudden became clear. He had not just wanted my home. He had wanted the assets he believed came with it. And somehow he had found enough papers to make me doubt myself. The more I looked, the worse it became. A loan application, a forged signature on a refinancing request, a transfer attempt from one account into another with Daniel's name on it as an authorized recipient. Not completed, but attempted. My hands went icy as the bank manager explained that someone had been asking about inheritance distributions and family management options. Family management options. That was how they dressed up theft now. I felt sick. I called Daniel from the bank parking lot. He answered on the fourth ring. "Mom, I'm in a meeting." "What have you done?" I asked. Silence. Then, "What are you talking about?" "The bank. The signatures. The transfer request." Another silence, longer this time. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. Gone was the son pretending to be patient. In his place was someone flat and offended, and dangerously calm. "You looked into it. You used my name. I was trying to prevent a mistake." A laugh escaped me, sharp and painful. "A mistake? You can't manage all of this on your own. This is my money. Not all of it." I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. "What does that mean?" He sighed. "Mom, just come home. We can talk about it like adults." "No." "Then you're forcing me to do this the hard way." My throat tightened. "Do what?" "I've already spoken to a lawyer." I nearly dropped the phone. "About what?" "A petition for temporary oversight," he said. "If the court thinks you're vulnerable, they can appoint someone to help. It's just a precaution." "You mean take control?" "Don't make it ugly." I hung up. For a full minute I could not breathe. Eli was beside me before I even realized I had called him. He must have seen my face because he did not ask questions. He just got into the car and said, "Tell me where to go." So I did. He drove me to a lawyer named Miss Alvarez, a woman with silver glasses and the kind of expression that says she has seen too much nonsense to be impressed by any of it. She reviewed everything and looked up with a frown. "This is not just overreach," she said. "This is a pattern. If your son submitted this paperwork knowing it was inaccurate, that is serious." I sat there numb while she explained legal terms I was too frightened to follow. All I understood was that Daniel had tried to build a story around me, in which I was confused, fragile, and easy to manipulate. And the worst part? He probably believed it himself. That evening, he called again. I did not answer. Then Miranda texted me. "You're embarrassing the family. Daniel is trying to protect you. Don't make him choose drastic measures." I stared at the screen until Eli took my phone out of my hand. "Don't read those tonight," he said. "It's my son." "No," he said quietly. "It's someone using your son's number to hurt you." I looked at him. He did not take back the words. He simply let them sit there between us. For the first time, I thought maybe he was right. That night I did not sleep. I sat in my kitchen until dawn with the bank statements spread out in front of me. Eli stayed in the guest room because I had insisted he not go home alone after helping me all day. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I realized I had not asked him why he cared so much. When I finally did, he smiled a little and looked embarrassed. "My mom used to work for the hospital cafeteria," he said. "She had cancer when I was 15. You brought her soup every time she was there, even when you were rushed off your feet. You probably don't remember. People like you helped us when we had nothing. I never forgot that." I stared at him in the half-light, stunned by the weight of a kindness I had completely forgotten giving. "That doesn't explain all this," I said softly. He leaned back in the chair. "My father left when I was 12. My mom did everything alone. I guess I know what it looks like when somebody's being worn down by family who should know better." I laughed once, tired and bitter. "That's a very polite way to say my son is a snake," he smiled. I was trying to be respectful. That cracked something open in me. I laughed, then cried, then laughed again through the tears. Eli handed me tissues without saying a word. By morning, I had made a decision. I was not going to disappear quietly. I would not sign away my home. I would not let Daniel call me confused while he and Miranda tried to swallow my life piece by piece. And I would not let my son miss my retirement day, then turn around and make himself the hero of my decline. Miss Alvarez filed an emergency objection. The bank froze the questionable transfers. The court scheduled a hearing. And for the first time in weeks, I felt my spine return. Daniel found out fast. He came to my house the next afternoon without warning, pounding on the door so hard the glass shook. Miranda stood behind him, arms folded, lips tight. Eli was in the driveway, fixing the latch on the side gate, when Daniel saw him and immediately strode over. "What the hell is he doing here?" Eli straightened. "Working," Daniel scoffed. "On what?" I opened the door before it became a scene in the yard. "Enough," I said. He looked at me as if he expected to find someone weaker. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You've let outsiders poison you." "Outsiders?" I repeated. "You mean the one person who showed up?" Miranda rolled her eyes. "Please, stop pretending this is noble. You've turned this into a drama because you don't like being questioned." I stepped outside onto the porch so I would not have to look at them through the doorway like a prisoner. "I asked you to come to my ceremony," I said to Daniel. "You didn't come. Not because you forgot. Not because you were late. You were with her and a lawyer trying to move my life around behind my back." His mouth tightened. "You don't understand the situation. Then explain it." He threw his hands up. "Fine. Your house is falling apart. Your accounts are complicated. You've been overwhelmed. We were trying to keep things from getting out of control." "By forging paperwork?" That was the first time Miranda's face changed. It was tiny. Just a flicker. But I saw it. Fear. Daniel turned to her for half a second, then back to me. "Who told you that?" "The bank." He looked at me as if I had betrayed him. "You went to the bank?" "I went everywhere you forgot I could go." His expression hardened. "So that's it. You'd rather trust a guy who mows your lawn than your own family?" Eli said nothing. He simply stood by the gate, steady and quiet. I lifted my chin. "I trust the person who does not lie to my face." Daniel laughed, but there was panic under it now. "You think this is about lying?" "Mom, I've been the one handling everything since Dad died." "No," I said. "You've been handling everything you thought you could control." Miranda stepped in. "You are not thinking clearly." I stared at her. "You were never supposed to speak for me in my house." She blinked, surprised I had finally said it aloud. "You've been in my kitchen, my bedroom, my accounts, and my marriage for years now, acting like I should be grateful for every manipulation wrapped as concern. I am done." Daniel's face reddened. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to be the one cleaning up after your decisions?" "My decisions?" I snapped. "I buried your father. I raised you. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. I missed your school plays and your basketball games because somebody had to keep this family alive. And now, the first time I ask you to stand beside me, you come to my house with a stranger and try to take it from me." He went still. For one small second, I thought I had reached him. Then he said the words that changed everything. "I did it because I needed the money." The yard went silent. Even the birds seemed to stop. He looked ashamed for the first time, but not enough to stop. "Miranda and I are in trouble," he said. "We made a bad investment." I stared at him. "What kind of trouble?" He swallowed. "A serious one." Miranda jumped in too quickly. "It was supposed to be temporary." "Temporary?" I repeated. Daniel scrubbed a hand over his face. "We thought we could use the equity. Just until the deal closed." I nearly could not speak. "You wanted to use my home to cover your bad investment? It was not supposed to come to this. Did you forge my signature?" He looked away. That was answer enough. The man I had raised looked down at his shoes like a boy caught stealing cookies, not like a husband and father who had nearly destroyed his mother's life for a gamble. I felt my whole body go cold with a kind of sorrow so deep it had no dramatic expression left. No shouting, no collapse. Just a deep, empty ache where trust used to live. Then Eli stepped forward. "Mrs. Walker," he said quietly, "you should hear the rest." Daniel snapped his head up. "Stay out of this." But Eli kept his eyes on me. "The reason I knew to bring the letter from your husband," he said, "is because I found out Daniel had been asking around town about your property months ago. He contacted people who knew the old records. One of them told me Daniel wasn't just trying to borrow against the house. He was trying to convince everyone you had already agreed. I looked at Daniel. His silence was confession enough. Miss Alvarez had warned me that if this went to court, they would need records, witnesses, and proof of intent. Eli had already started gathering it all. It turned out he had once done bookkeeping for a small contracting company and knew how to track paper trails better than most people. By the time the hearing came, I had testimony from the bank, printed texts from Miranda, and one ugly email from Daniel to a lender stating that my mother is becoming unreliable and may need family intervention. Reading those words made me feel as if something inside me had cracked clean through. Family intervention. That was his phrase for theft. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected and somehow more humiliating because of it. Daniel sat across from me in a navy suit that made him look like a man pretending to be responsible. Miranda sat behind him with her chin lifted, though her fingers never stopped moving. Their lawyer tried to present the situation as concern for my aging capacity, but Miss Alvarez dismantled that story piece by piece. The judge asked me questions directly. Could I manage my finances? Yes. Did I understand the documents presented to me? Yes. Did I ever authorize Daniel to transfer or sell property without my written consent? No. Was I aware that the signatures submitted by Daniel did not match my own? Yes. Then came the part that broke Daniel completely. The judge asked whether I had attended my retirement celebration. When I answered that my son had missed it, the room seemed to shift. I did not say it with drama. I did not need to. I simply said, "He told me he would be there." I waited for him. Daniel's face changed. For the first time, he could not hide behind irritation or authority. He just looked like what he was, a man who had thought one lie could cover a mountain of them. The court ruled in my favor. The fraudulent filings were rejected. The temporary oversight petition was denied. The bank referred the signatures and attempted transfers to investigators. The lender backed away the moment the paperwork was exposed. The judge made it clear that Daniel had overstepped in a way that could not be brushed aside as misunderstanding. But that was only the legal part. The human part came after. As everyone stood to leave, Daniel called out, "Mom!" I paused but did not turn. His voice broke slightly. I was going to fix it. I turned then, slowly. By stealing from me? He swallowed hard. I panicked. You missed my retirement ceremony because you were busy panicking over money you should never have touched. His eyes filled, and for one painful moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered the empty chair, the voicemail, the kitchen, the humiliation. "I loved you anyway," I said, "even when you were difficult, even when you were selfish, even when you disappointed me. That love was never conditional. But what you did was not disappointment, Daniel. It was betrayal." He looked away. Miranda stood up fast. "You're acting like he committed some terrible crime. Families help each other." I turned to her, and my voice was calm in a way that frightened even me. Families do help each other. They do not lie, forge, and scheme against one another while calling it love. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Because she knew. She had known all along. And when the truth finally started to spread, it spread fast. The court hearing was not some dramatic public spectacle, but towns are small, and people talked. The bank people talked. The lawyers talked. The contracting company where Daniel had been trying to raise money talked. Soon it became clear that his investment had been a failed attempt to flip a property with borrowed funds and hidden debt. He had dragged Miranda into it, and she had encouraged the pressure on me because she believed my house was the quickest way out. It was greed dressed up as panic. It was panic dressed up as family, and it cost them everything they had built on lies. A month later, Daniel called me from somewhere quiet enough that I could hear his breathing. He said he had lost his job. He said Miranda had left. He said the lenders had taken action. He said he was sorry. I listened without interrupting. When he finally stopped talking, I asked the only question left. "Were you ever going to tell me the truth?" He was silent so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then he whispered, "I don't know." That answer hurt more than anger would have, because it meant there had been a version of my son who had existed just long enough to choose differently, and he hadn't. I need you to understand something, I said. I am not punishing you. The law is not punishing you. You did this. His breathing hitched once. I know. No, I said. You know consequences. That is different. He started to cry then, softly, the kind of crying grown men do when they are ashamed and cornered, and finally old enough to hear themselves clearly. I did not gloat. I did not yell. I simply let him sit in the silence he had made. When I hung up, Eli was in the garden planting new roses where the old ones had died in the heat. He looked up when he saw my face. Bad call? Necessary one, I said. He nodded like he understood exactly what that meant. After that, life did not magically become easy. That is the part stories often lie about. Healing was not a single speech, and justice did not arrive wearing a ribbon. My son still remained my son, which meant grief stayed complicated. Some mornings I woke up angry all over again. Some nights I wondered whether I had failed him by loving him too freely. Other nights I remembered my husband's letter and realized love is not what failed. Entitlement did. The hospital invited me back a few weeks later for a small follow-up celebration they had forgotten to hold because of my retirement day chaos. This time, I did not wait for Daniel. I did not save him a seat. I did not tell anyone I was expecting family. I wore a blue dress that made me feel strong. Eli drove me there because I still did not trust my knee on long walks. Before we went inside, I saw him wearing that same— What? I asked. He looked at me for a second and then smiled. Nothing. You just look happy. I laughed softly. Careful. That kind of thing can make a woman suspicious, he chuckled. I'll remember that. Inside the hall, I found coworkers who had made time for me again, not because I was useful, but because they actually loved me. Linda gave a speech about dedication and grace. People hugged me. They laughed. They asked about my garden. Someone handed me a cupcake with too much frosting, and for the first time in months, my chest felt light. And then, halfway through the celebration, I saw Daniel standing at the back of the room. He had not been invited. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in spirit. His suit was plain. His shoulders were curved as if life had finally pressed back hard enough to change him. He did not come near me. He simply stood there and watched. Our eyes met. I waited. He took one step forward and stopped. Then, in front of everyone, he lowered his head and walked back out. No drama, no scene. Just a man finally understanding that there are moments in a life that cannot be recovered by appearing late. I stood there a long time after he left. Eli touched my elbow gently. Do you want to go after him? I looked at the door, then back at the room full of people who had come to celebrate me without asking for anything in return. No, I said, and I meant it. Because some lessons have to be lived all the way through before they can become wisdom. The final twist came 2 weeks later, from the bank. Daniel had tried one last time to file a quiet appeal using a second set of documents. Not a full theft this time, but enough to show he still believed he could bend reality if he pushed hard enough. The bank denied it and flagged the whole pattern for review. That review uncovered more than anyone expected. The same tactics had been used on another older client in a neighboring town, though not successfully. My son had apparently convinced himself that pressure was a tool and guilt was a language he could use on anyone who loved him. That discovery ended any remaining sympathy from the people who had once been willing to call it a family disagreement. His employer dropped him. The lenders closed in. Miranda's family, who had quietly encouraged the scheme at first, backed away when the documents became public. Daniel was left with no one to impress and nowhere to hide. And me? I kept my house. I kept my savings. I kept my dignity. Most of all, I kept the right to decide who sat at my table. One evening, near the end of summer, I sat on the porch with Eli while the sun fell low over the trees. The air smelled like cut grass, and the roses he had planted were finally blooming. I had spent months thinking family was something you were born with, something permanent and unquestionable. But there, in the golden quiet, I understood something else. Family is not blood alone. Family is the person who shows up when your own child does not. Family is the person who notices your hands shaking and does not call you dramatic. Family is the one who stays in the parking lot holding your coat while your heart is breaking. I looked at Eli and smiled. He smiled back, almost shy. What? He asked. I shook my head. Nothing. Just thinking how strange life is. He nodded. Strange, but not always cruel. No, I said, watching the last light fall across the yard. Not always. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and stood in my kitchen alone for the first time in months without feeling lonely. My son's betrayal had hurt me more deeply than I ever thought possible, but it had also stripped away the lie I had lived with for years, that being needed was the same as being loved. Now I knew better, and because I knew better, I had something my son had never understood: peace. Years from now, people may remember the scandal only as a family dispute over money and property. They may never know about the empty chair at my retirement banquet, the voicemail in the parking lot, or the stranger who became the truest part of that day. But I will remember. I will remember the young man I barely knew who stood beside me when my own blood failed me.